Made you some go-go juice for the big day, Bill Jensen announced, his voice booming with an uncharacteristic, almost violently forced cheerfulness that immediately set my teeth on edge and sent a warning signal pinging through my nervous system. He thrust a brightly colored, insulated travel mug towards me across the worn Formica breakfast counter. The liquid inside sloshed, a lurid shade of electric blue that screamed artificial fruit flavoring, excessive sugar, and enough caffeine to jumpstart a small vehicle. I managed to conjure a tight smile, accepting the offered mug. Its smooth plastic surface felt cool, almost clammy, against my slightly damp palms. Thanks, Bill. Really appreciate it. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 28 years old, and navigating the seemingly simple morning routine in the modest house I still shared with my mother, Karen, and my stepfather, Bill, often felt like traversing a subtle, invisible minefield. Especially today. Today was the interview. The pivotal one, the one that felt like a potential lifeline, for a marketing coordinator position at Ridgeline Media. They were the dynamic, rapidly growing digital marketing agency headquartered in a sleek downtown Austin high-rise, the company I'd been meticulously researching and strategically targeting for months, the place that represented not just a job, but a tangible escape route. Bill leaned back against the counter, arms crossed tightly over his checkered flannel work shirt, a uniform he wore even on his days off. He watched me with an unnerving intensity that completely belied his attempt at a casual posture. Mid-50s, with a face weathered like old leather from years spent working outdoors as a general contractor, Bill had married my mom 4 years ago, sweeping into our quiet lives with a gruff charm that had initially seemed like stability. He presented himself as a plain-spoken, tells-it-like-it-is, no-nonsense realist, a man who valued hard work and tangible results over what he called fancy talk, or head-in-the-clouds ideas. In reality, his self-proclaimed realism often manifested as thinly veiled, corrosive disdain for anything outside his own immediate sphere of understanding. Particularly my chosen field of marketing. My college degree he saw as frivolous, and, more pointedly over the last 18 months, my frustrating struggles to land a permanent career track position after a pandemic-related layoff from a junior role at a smaller agency. Wouldn't want you dragging your feet on your big chance, now would we? He added, the smile fixed on his face, but utterly absent from his cool, watchful eyes. That was Bill's signature move. The seemingly supportive words delivered with a look, a tone, an undercurrent that suggested profound doubt, perhaps even a perverse sort of pity. With deliberate slowness, feigning casualness, I raised the mug towards my lips, pretending I was about to take a large, preparatory gulp. I stopped just short, inhaling slightly as if to check the temperature. A faint, undeniably acrid smell hit my nostrils immediately, cutting sharply through the cloying, synthetic sweetness of the blue liquid. Bitter, metallic, almost chemical. My stomach tightened instantly, involuntarily. At the same moment, my eyes caught something else. A faint, almost invisible powdery residue clinging stubbornly near the rim of the mug, just under the edge of the black plastic lid. Tiny white specks, easily missed if you weren't looking closely, stark against the dark plastic. Alarm bells, no longer faint but clanging insistently, started ringing loud and clear in the back of my mind. This wasn't just Bill's usual clumsy, backhanded attempt at pre-interview encouragement. This felt fundamentally wrong. Dangerous, even. Whoa, smells potent, I said, forcing my voice to remain light, casual, stretching my lips into a wider, hopefully convincing smile. Probably need to let this cool down a bit. Wouldn't want to burn my tongue. I quickly, firmly snapped the lid shut, the plastic click echoing slightly in the otherwise quiet kitchen. I'll sip it on the way. Don't want to be late for the bus. I always took the bus to interviews, not wanting to deal with downtown parking, a detail Bill knew and often mocked. Bill Bill's fixed smile tightened fractionally at the edges, a flicker of something unreadable, annoyance. Disappointment? Flashing briefly in his eyes before being masked again. Suit yourself, he grunted, turning back abruptly to his own steaming mug of black coffee, dismissing me with a deliberate shift of his shoulders. Just go knock 'em dead, kid. I grabbed my worn leather portfolio case from the chair where I'd left it the night before, my heart now thudding against my ribs with a sudden, unpleasant, sickening certainty. The interview at Ridgeline wasn't just a job. It represented my escape hatch, my tangible path out of this increasingly suffocating house. It was a chance to finally regain my financial independence, to utilize the skills I'd spent years honing, to prove, perhaps mostly to myself, but also undeniably to Bill, that my marketing degree wasn't the expensive waste of time he so often implied it was. 4 years of college learning how to pick pretty colors for brochures and write fancy slogans was one of his favorite dismissive refrains, usually delivered with a condescending chuckle. My mom, Karen, a dedicated nurse whose grueling shifts at the nearby hospital often started before the sun rose, had already left hours ago. That meant it was just me and Bill in the house this morning. Me, Bill, and the travel mug of electric blue go-go juice that smelled distinctly, dangerously wrong. As I headed for the front door, shrugging on my only decent suit jacket, slightly tight across the shoulders now, bought years ago for college career fairs, I couldn't shake the memory of other seemingly random, frustrating incidents that had plagued my job search over the past year. Incidents I'd previously dismissed as sheer bad luck or my own disorganization. There was the alarm clock on my phone mysteriously failing to go off on the morning of a crucial second-round video interview with a promising tech startup. Bill had coincidentally borrowed my phone charger the night before, returning it just as I woke up late and flustered. There was the time my meticulously organized digital portfolio file, saved on my laptop's desktop, suddenly became corrupted and inaccessible the very night before a deadline for a major freelance presentation. Bill had been fixing a supposedly loose electrical wire near my desk setup earlier that same day, fiddling with the power strip my laptop was plugged into. And then there were the multiple instances of the internet connection inexplicably dropping. Only in my room. Only during important video calls or online skills tests, while the connection remained perfectly stable in the rest of the house. Each time, Bill had been home, often offering gruff, unhelpful comments like, "Technology, huh? Told you can't rely on that fancy stuff." Or, "Maybe you should have double-checked that connection before the call." At the time, blinded by stress and a naive reluctance to suspect malicious intent from my own stepfather, I'd chalked it all up to coincidence, to the inherent unreliability of technology, the vague frustrations of Mercury in retrograde, or perhaps even my own stress-induced errors and oversights. But now, holding this strangely scented mug, feeling the weight of Bill's watchful, unsmiling eyes on my back as I walked away, a colder, more disturbing, and terrifyingly plausible possibility began to crystallize in the pit of my stomach. Could Bill's constant disapproval, his simmering resentment of my continued presence in the house, his possible insecurity about his own life path compared to my, in his view, useless education, have curdled into something far more active, more sinister? Could he actually be sabotaging my efforts to get a job, to move out, to succeed on my own terms? The thought felt deeply unsettling, paranoid, almost absurd when considered in the light of day. Yet the bitter chemical smell lingering from the mug, the calculating flicker I'd seen in his eyes, the undeniable pattern of conveniently timed accidents. It resonated with a chilling internal logic that I could no longer ignore. 2 blocks from the house, heart still pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs, I pulled the Subaru into a quiet, mostly deserted gas station. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt. under the harsh, unforgiving fluorescent lights of the attached convenience store. I walked quickly, purposefully, not towards the coffee machine, but straight to the men's restroom at the back. Inside the relative privacy of a locked stall, I popped the plastic lid off the travel mug Bill had given me. The chemical smell immediately hit me again, stronger now in the confined space, unmistakable and nauseating. I tilted the mug carefully over the toilet bowl. The electric blue liquid flowed out thick, slightly viscous, not like any energy drink I'd ever seen. It left a strange, oily sheen on the white porcelain surface before I flushed, watching the unnatural color swirl and disappear down the drain with a decisive gurgle. My hands were shaking slightly, a tremor born of adrenaline and a terrifying confirmation of my suspicions, as I rinsed the mug thoroughly, repeatedly, at the sink, trying to wash away the lingering metallic tang that seemed to cling to the air itself. I dried it meticulously with coarse paper towels before tucking it securely back into the side pocket of my briefcase. Evidence? Of what, precisely, I still wasn't certain. An attempt to make me sick, disoriented, too groggy to perform well. But my gut, honed perhaps by years of subconsciously navigating Bill's subtle undermining and negativity, screamed that I had just narrowly dodged something deliberately harmful. I couldn't prove his intent, not yet, but the suspicion that had been vaguely forming for months had now solidified into near certainty in the harsh light of that gas station restroom. Bill didn't just disapprove of my path, he was actively trying to derail it. He didn't want me to succeed, didn't want me moving out, didn't want me escaping his sphere of quiet control, veiled criticism, and pervasive negativity. The cold realization sent a shiver tracing its way down my spine, colder and sharper than the early morning Austin air outside. I arrived at the sleek, glass and steel facade of the Ridgeline Media headquarters building with a comfortable 20 minutes to spare. Enough time, thankfully, to detour across the street to an artisanal cafe buzzing with early morning creative types and grab a real coffee. Black, hot, blessedly aromatic, and reassuringly normal. Clutching the paper cup like a talisman, I entered the Ridgeline lobby. It was a world away from the tense, cluttered atmosphere of my mother's house, minimalist design, polished concrete floors, vibrant, abstract art on the walls, a quiet hum of focused, creative energy permeating the air. I checked in with the friendly receptionist and took a seat on a low-slung, modern sofa, trying to project an aura of calm confidence I didn't entirely feel. My leather portfolio lay open on my lap, showcasing printouts of campaigns I'd designed for previous freelance clients, detailed mock-ups I'd painstakingly created for hypothetical Ridgeline clients, demonstrating my strategic thinking and design skills. But my mind wasn't on reviewing my work. Instead, it was racing, replaying the frustrating litany of incidents from the past year, viewing them now through the newly acquired, terrifyingly clarifying lens of potential, deliberate sabotage. The faulty alarm clock incident. Suddenly, I remembered Bill had been the one to helpfully plug my phone charger back in that morning, after supposedly borrowing it overnight, maybe resetting the alarm then. The corrupted portfolio file. Bill had been fixing a supposedly loose electrical wire near my desk setup earlier that same day, fiddling with the power strip my laptop and external hard drive were plugged into. Could a deliberate power surge have caused the corruption? The multiple dropped Wi-Fi connections during crucial online interviews. Bill had been tidying the router cables in the living room, complaining about the messy wires just before each of those calls. Each incident, viewed in isolation, had seemed irritating but plausibly accidental, the kind of frustrating bad luck that happens. But strung together, viewed as a pattern. A pattern where Bill was always present, always had plausible access, always offered unhelpful commentary afterwards. It formed a deeply disturbing picture, a constellation of conveniently timed mishaps that seemed statistically improbable, And now, the energy drink incident, the most blatant and potentially harmful act yet. It wasn't random misfortune. It felt calculated. It felt like escalation. A cold, hard fury began to burn beneath the surface of my pre-interview anxiety. He hadn't just been passively disapproving, content to mock my choices from the sidelines. He'd seemingly been actively, secretly working against me, trying to keep me stuck, dependent, perhaps to validate his own narrative of my inadequacy, to prove his warnings about my chosen path correct. Why? The question hammered at me again. Was it really just petty jealousy or competition for Mom's attention, as I'd vaguely suspected? Or was it something deeper, more twisted? A fundamental resentment of my education, which he lacked. A profound insecurity about his own life choices projected onto me? Maybe it was an ugly tangle of all of the above. But the why mattered less right now than the what. He had, I was now almost certain, tried to drug me, or at least impair me, before the single most important interview of my nascent career. The betrayal felt profound, sickening. When the sleekly dressed receptionist finally called my name, "Ethan Carter? Sarah Chen will see you now." I stood up abruptly, snapping my portfolio shut with a decisive click. The swirling mix of anger, shock, lingering fear, and adrenaline, I consciously pushed it all down, deep inside, channeling it not into panic, but into a focused, diamond-hard resolve. This interview wasn't just about landing a job anymore. It wasn't just about finally escaping Bill's oppressive orbit. It was about proving him wrong, fundamentally, unequivocally wrong, not with accusations or confrontations I couldn't yet win, but with sheer, undeniable competence. It was about taking back control of my narrative, my future. I smoothed the knot of my slightly too tight tie, took a deep, grounding breath, and walked towards the glass-walled conference room, feeling more determined, more fiercely, galvanizingly alive than I had in months. Bill Jensen wanted me to fail. I would not give him the satisfaction. The interview itself unfolded in a state of almost preternatural focus, a near out-of-body experience where the gnawing anxiety that usually accompanied such high-stakes encounters was completely eclipsed by a surge of adrenaline and crystalline clarity. I felt sharp, articulate, present in a way I rarely did under pressure. I presented my portfolio work, not just showing the visuals, but clearly explaining the strategic thinking, the market analysis, the target audience insights behind each campaign concept with a confidence that felt both foreign and deeply authentic. I spoke passionately and knowledgeably about Ridgeline's own recent campaigns, offering specific, insightful critiques, identifying missed opportunities, suggesting alternative A/B testing scenarios, and proposing innovative digital approaches for some of their key clients, demonstrating I hadn't just researched the company, but had actively engaged with their work on a strategic level. The hiring manager, Sarah Chen, a sharp, perceptive woman in her late 30s with intelligent eyes, and the two senior team leads flanking her, listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes, nodding, their initial professional reserve gradually thawing into genuine interest. They asked challenging questions about navigating difficult client feedback, about measuring campaign ROI in nuanced ways, about managing conflicting priorities under tight deadlines, about my experience with specific analytics platforms and SEO optimization techniques, about fostering team collaboration in a fast-paced environment. I answered each question directly, articulately, drawing confidently on the breadth of experience I'd gained through years of self-directed learning and often stressful, but ultimately formative, freelance projects. The attempt at sabotage, the bitter metallic taste of the energy drink still haunting the back of my throat, the oppressive weight of Bill's disapproval that had shadowed me for so long. Paradoxically, it all seemed to fuel my performance rather than hinder it. It was as if the act of consciously rejecting his negativity, of refusing to internalize his assessment of my worth had somehow unshackled my actual capabilities, allowing my skills and passion to finally shine through, unburdened. The fire Bill had tried to extinguish had instead forged a harder resolve within me. You've clearly done your homework on us, Ethan, and more importantly, you clearly understand the why behind the what in digital marketing, Sarah Chen remarked towards the end of the hour-long session, leaning back slightly in her chair, a genuine, impressed smile replacing her earlier professional poker face. The team leads murmured their agreement. Your portfolio shows not just creativity, but a strong strategic mind, which is exactly what we're looking for. One final question, and it's a standard one, but always revealing. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I met her gaze directly, the answer rising easily, honestly, from the core of my long-held ambitions, now sharpened by the morning's events. Building something lasting, I said, the words resonating with a newfound, unshakable conviction. Not just chasing clicks or fleeting trends. I want to be leading campaigns that don't just sell products, but create genuine connections between brands and their audiences, using data and creativity synergistically to tell compelling stories that matter, stories that resonate. And doing that as part of a collaborative, innovative team that values integrity and results, ideally, right here, contributing to Ridgeline's continued success. Sarah smiled again, a wider, more genuine expression this time. Well said, Ethan. Thank you for coming in today. We really appreciate your time and thoughtful preparation. She stood, extending a hand. We do have a few more candidates scheduled this week, a very competitive pool for this role, but we'll definitely be in touch regarding next steps very soon. As I walked out of the gleaming Ridgeline offices and back into the bright, almost blinding Austin sunshine, I felt lighter than I had in years, almost buoyant, walking on air. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I had nailed it. Regardless of the final outcome, whether I got this specific job or not, I had performed at my absolute best, finally unshackled from the insidious negativity and self-doubt that had clouded my recent past. Driving home later that afternoon, the familiar city skyline gleaming in the hazy afternoon light, I allowed myself a rare, extended moment of quiet, internal triumph. Then, just as I was merging onto the highway, my phone rang, startling me. The caller ID showed Ridgeline Media's main number. My heart leapt into my throat. So soon? Ethan Carter speaking, I answered, trying to keep my voice steady, pulling over safely onto the shoulder of the busy highway. Ethan? Hi, it's Sarah Chen calling back from Ridgeline, she said, her voice warm, friendly. I know we said we'd be in touch soon, but the team met immediately after your interview, and frankly, the discussion was very brief. She paused for effect. We were all exceptionally impressed with your presentation, your strategic thinking, and your clear passion for the industry. So much so that we've decided to expedite our decision process considerably. Another pause, this one filled with my hammering pulse. Ethan, the team was unanimous. We'd like to formally offer you the marketing coordinator position. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. I gripped the steering wheel tightly. Thank you, Sarah, I stammered, momentarily overwhelmed, the words catching in my throat. Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely, yes, I accept. Definitely. She laughed lightly. Wonderful. We're thrilled to have you potentially join the team. We quickly discussed the specifics. The starting salary, which was decent, certainly more than enough to finally afford my own place and escape Bill's orbit. The comprehensive benefits package kicking in after the standard 90-day probationary period, and a start date just 2 weeks away, allowing me time to give notice if needed, which I didn't, and find an apartment. As I hung up the phone, a wide, irrepressible grin stretching across my face, the reality finally, fully sunk in. I had done it. Against the odds, against the subtle sabotage, against the weight of expectation and disapproval, I had the job. My escape hatch wasn't just potential anymore. It was real, tangible, and just 2 weeks away. The euphoria, potent and dizzying, carried me all the way home. I parked the Subaru, the same slightly battered car Bill often made comments about, grabbed my portfolio, and practically bounded towards the front door, eager to share the incredible news, at least with my mother when she got home from her shift later that evening. But as I pushed the familiar front door open, the triumphant feeling that had buoyed me evaporated instantly, replaced by a sudden, chilling dread that turned my blood cold. The sound hit me first, a low, guttural, wrenching noise coming from the direction of the living room. It was a sound of profound physical distress. I stepped inside cautiously, my senses on high alert. Bill was slumped, almost collapsed, on the living room couch, clutching his stomach, his face a ghastly, unnatural shade of pale green. Sweat beaded profusely on his forehead, plastering thin strands of graying hair to his temples. A cheap plastic bucket sat precariously on the worn carpet between his knees, evidence of his violent illness. And beside him, lying on its side on the end table, stark against the dark wood, sat the brightly colored, insulated travel mug. My travel mug, the one he'd so cheerfully pressed on me that morning, now lying empty, its lid askew. He looked up weakly as I entered, his eyes bloodshot, unfocused with pain, but they narrowed slightly with suspicion, perhaps even a flicker of fear when he saw me standing there in the doorway, unharmed, composed, portfolio still clutched in my hand. "You're back," he mumbled, the words raspy, forced through gritted teeth. He wiped his mouth shakily with the back of his hand, a thin sheen of moisture glistening on his upper lip. "Yeah," I said, deliberately keeping my voice neutral, carefully masking the chilling certainty, the sickening understanding that instantly flooded through me. "Just got back now." I held up my portfolio slightly, a small, almost involuntary gesture. "Got the job, by the way. Start in 2 weeks. Something flickered rapidly across his pale, sweaty face. Surprise, definitely, maybe disbelief. Then something darker, harder to decipher. Anger, resentment, or perhaps, just perhaps, the dawning horror of realization. He just nodded curtly, a single, jerky movement, a muscle twitching uncontrollably in his clenched jaw, before groaning loudly and bending low over the bucket again, his body convulsing. Just then, my mother rushed in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her face immediately etched with worry as she took in the scene. "Andrew, honey, you're home." "Oh my goodness, Bill." She hurried to his side, automatically switching into her capable nurse mode, placing a cool hand on his forehead, her professional concern overriding any other questions. "Still feeling awful? Worse, even?" "They offered me the position, Mom," I said again, louder this time, unable to completely keep the note of quiet, hard-won triumph from my voice, despite the bizarre, disturbing tableau unfolding just feet away. "On the spot. Signed the offer letter electronically. I start Monday week." She turned towards me then, her worry momentarily forgotten, her tired face lighting up with genuine, unadulterated joy. "Oh, Andrew, honey, that's wonderful. Just wonderful news." She rushed over and enveloped me in a tight, fierce hug, burying her face briefly in my shoulder. "I knew you could do it. I always knew." Over her shoulder, my gaze locked onto Bill. He wasn't looking at us. He had tilted his head back against the couch cushions, eyes closed, breathing shallowly, raggedly, seemingly oblivious, or perhaps deliberately ignoring the moment of my success. "What happened to him?" I asked quietly, pulling away slightly from Mom's embrace, nodding towards Bill. "Oh, some kind of awful bug, maybe." "Food poisoning?" she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, automatically rubbing Bill's tense back with a soothing motion. "He got violently sick seemingly out of nowhere right after you left for your interview this morning. Said he felt fine one minute, then suddenly, well," she gestured towards the bucket. "Running for the bathroom. Been like this, on and off, all day long. Won't say much about what he might have eaten." "All day," I repeated softly, the final piece clicking irrevocably into place with cold, hard, sickening certainty. "Since when exactly this morning?" "Almost immediately after you walked out the door, basically," Mom confirmed, still entirely oblivious to the sinister undercurrent. "Maybe 10, 15 minutes after you left? He said he must have grabbed something quick on the way to the work site, something bad." She frowned slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "Funny, though. He didn't mention stopping anywhere this morning when he called to say he was feeling too sick to go in." I nodded slowly, the picture now complete, chillingly, undeniably clear. Bill hadn't stopped anywhere for food. After I had politely declined his special energy coffee, or rather, his go-go juice, and left it behind, untouched on the kitchen counter, he must have decided, perhaps out of thriftiness, perhaps out of arrogance, perhaps simply forgetting in his haste what exactly he'd mixed into it, not to waste it. He had drunk his own poisonous trap. The bitter metallic taste I'd noticed, the powdery residue, wasn't just harmless flavoring or vitamins. It was the taste of his own failed sabotage, now working its miserable, retching effects on him instead of me. A strange, dark, almost Shakespearean form of poetic justice was playing out on my mother's floral living room couch, and chillingly, only I understood the true, twisted script. The tension in the house over the next 48 hours was thick enough to cut with a knife. Bill, clearly sensing the shift in allegiance and the newfound resolve in both Mom and me, became sullen and withdrawn, retreating into long hours, ostensibly working in the garage or watching television with the volume turned up loud, avoiding direct interaction. Mom moved with a quiet, determined efficiency, making her phone calls, gathering documents, her usual warmth replaced by a steely focus. We barely spoke, communicating mostly through necessity or brief, supportive glances. The air crackled with unspoken accusations and the heavy weight of impending confrontation. On Friday night, my last night under that roof, I retreated to the garage after dinner to make sure my car was fully packed and ready for an early departure. The garage had always been Bill's domain, cluttered with tools, lumber scraps, half-finished projects, smelling perpetually of sawdust, oil, and resentment. He was there, as I expected, leaning against his workbench, nursing a beer, pointedly ignoring me as I organized the last few items in my trunk. Knowing this might be my last chance for a direct confrontation, and fueled by a mixture of residual anger, the need for closure, and perhaps Hannah's earlier encouragement to bridge the gap, though this felt more like controlled demolition, I decided to deploy the final piece of evidence. I took a deep breath. "Bill," I began, keeping my voice steady, "we need to talk about the energy drink." He stiffened but didn't turn around, just took a long pull from his beer. "Don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do," I countered, walking closer so I was standing beside him at the workbench. "The one you made for me before my Ridgeline interview. The one that made you sick when you drank it instead." He finally turned, his face contorted in a sneer. "Got lucky, didn't ya? Should have drunk it yourself. Maybe you'd have learned something about real work ethic instead of playing games." The admission, wrapped in hostility, was startlingly blatant. "Maybe," I said coolly. Or maybe I just got lucky finding this. I pulled out my phone, my hand surprisingly steady. I tapped the screen and opened the video file. I'd known installing that small, cheap, motion-activated security camera in the kitchen weeks ago was a good idea. I'd told Mom it was for general security, but truthfully, small, inexplicable things had been going missing. Loose change from the counter, a specific tool I'd left out, Mom's favorite mug vanished, and a darker suspicion about Bill's behavior had already begun to form, long before the energy drink incident. I just hadn't expected the camera to capture this. I held the phone up, angling the screen so Bill couldn't avoid seeing it. The footage, slightly grainy but perfectly clear, showed the kitchen counter from that morning. It showed Bill, back to the camera initially, then turning, furtively glancing towards the hallway. It showed him taking the unmarked pill bottle from his pocket. My pill bottle. The empty one I'd swapped weeks before, which he must have refilled from his own hidden stash. It clearly showed him crushing several small white pills into a powder using the back of a spoon, then carefully, deliberately, stirring the white powder into the bright blue liquid already in my travel mug. The timestamp in the corner was undeniable. Bill stared at the phone screen, his face freezing, the color draining completely, leaving behind a pasty, shocked pallor. The beer can slipped slightly in his suddenly nerveless grip. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The bluster, the denial, the anger, it all vanished, replaced by raw, undisguised fear and the dawning horror of being caught, undeniably, irrefutably, on camera. He was utterly exposed, trapped in the harsh glare of the phone screen, right there in the middle of his own cluttered domain. "Sleep aids, Bill?" I asked quietly, lowering the phone. "Or something stronger?" "What exactly were you hoping would happen when I drank that before driving to the most important interview of my life?" He remained frozen, speechless, his eyes darting around the garage as if seeking an escape route that didn't exist. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of his actions. "Mom knows," I stated flatly, letting the words land. "She knows about the drink, she knows about the pills, she knows about the email forwarding." I paused. "And she knows about the money you've been taking from her savings account for the past 3 years. That last part seemed to break him. A low groan escaped his lips. He finally looked at me, his eyes filled not with anger now, but with a desperate, pleading panic. "Ethan, listen. It wasn't... I didn't mean..." "Save it, Bill." I cut him off, my voice cold, devoid of the sympathy he was perhaps hoping for. "You meant every bit of it. You've been trying to keep me down, keep me dependent, keep Mom isolated. But it's over." I took a step back towards the door. "Mom's meeting with a lawyer on Monday. I suggest you find one too." I turned and walked out of the garage, leaving him standing there amidst the sawdust and the shadows, finally stripped bare of his deceptions, the undeniable video evidence likely still playing on a loop in his horrified mind. There was no satisfaction in his defeat, only a grim sense of necessity, a feeling that a long festering wound had finally been lanced. Weeks later, comfortably settled into my new apartment and thriving in the challenging, creative environment at Ridgeline Media, the call came. I was reviewing campaign analytics, enjoying the quiet focus of my own space, when my phone vibrated. It was Mom. Her voice when I answered was strained, thin, but underscored by a current of steely resolve I hadn't heard before. "Ethan?" "Honey, it's Mom." "Hey, Mom. What's up? Everything okay?" A knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach despite myself. "It is now," she said, her voice gaining strength. "Or it will be. Ethan, I did what I had to do this afternoon." A pause. The police just left Aunt June's house. I gripped the edge of my desk, pulling my chair closer, bracing myself. What happened, Mom? Tell me. After you showed me that video, she began, her voice trembling slightly at the memory. And the bank confirmed the forgeries. I confronted him again yesterday, when I went back to get more clothes, told him I knew everything. Told him I was leaving, filing for divorce, contacting the authorities. She took a shaky breath. He didn't take it well. There was yelling. He tried to deny it, then tried to apologize, then got angry again. Another pause. During the argument, while he was distracted, I looked in his workshop closet, where he kept some locked boxes. I found them, Ethan. More unmarked bottles of those same pills. And worse, printouts. Bank statements from hidden accounts I never knew existed. Receipts for things, expensive things he told me we couldn't afford. Her voice broke slightly. So much lying. Oh, Mom. So this morning, she continued, her voice hardening with renewed determination. I took everything. The video file you sent me, the bank's fraud report, the pills I found, the statements from the hidden accounts, and I went down to the police station. I filed a formal report. Everything. Wow, Mom. That took incredible courage. It felt necessary, she said simply. They listened. They took it seriously. They got a warrant. Went to the house this afternoon while he was out on a supposed job site. Her voice dropped. Ethan, they arrested him about an hour ago, brought him downtown for questioning. Relief washed over me, profound and complex. What are the charges? The detective said potentially felony fraud, forgery, illegal possession of prescription medication without a prescription, maybe even identity theft because of the email forwarding and setting up those hidden accounts. They're investigating everything thoroughly. She sounded exhausted, but also liberated. I'm at Aunt June's now, safe and sound. Going to stay here for a while, figure things out. Okay, Mom, I said softly. Okay, you did the right thing, the incredibly brave thing. Thanks to you, Ethan, she whispered. Thanks for opening my eyes, for showing me the truth, even when it hurt. After we hung up, I sat staring out my apartment window at the Austin skyline for a long time, the city lights beginning to twinkle against the darkening sky. Bill arrested, facing serious consequences for years of deception and manipulation. Justice, initiated not by my confrontation alone, but by my mother's courageous choice to take action based on the truth I'd finally revealed. It wasn't the explosive revenge fantasy some might have imagined, but a quieter, more profound victory. The victory of truth over lies, of courage over fear. A few days later, needing to retrieve the last few sentimental items I hadn't packed initially, I made one final, brief visit to the old house. Bill was still detained pending arraignment, and Mom was firmly ensconced at Aunt June's farm, refusing any contact with him. The house felt eerily quiet, hollow, stripped of the tension that had permeated it for so long. I moved quickly, gathering a box of old photo albums, my grandfather's fishing lure collection, a few favorite books. Before leaving for the last time, I paused in the kitchen. On the counter, where Mom would be sure to find it when she eventually returned to deal with the house, I placed a large, sealed manila file folder. Inside, I had gathered practical resources for her. Printouts of the bank statements clearly showing the pattern of fraudulent withdrawals I'd helped her identify. The contact information for the highly reputable divorce lawyer specializing in financial abuse whom Maya Carter had recommended. Printed details for the modest but safe apartment lease I had preemptively secured in her name near Aunt June's farm, presented clearly as an option, a safety net if she needed it, not an obligation. And finally, tucked inside, a simple, handwritten note on plain paper. It read, "Mom, take all the time you need to heal. Focus on yourself now. When you're ready to rebuild, whatever that looks like, whenever that may be, call me. I'll always be here for you. Love, Ethan." I closed the front door behind me for the last time, the click echoing in the empty house. I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove towards my new apartment, towards my new job, towards my own future, leaving the wreckage of Bill's making behind, but leaving a door firmly, hopefully, open for my mother's recovery and eventual return. 6 months later, time and distance had worked their quiet magic. I stood in the sleek, sunlit main conference room at Ridgeline Media, clicking confidently through the final slides of my presentation for their upcoming winter gear collection campaign. The concept I'd poured my energy into, foregoing flashy celebrity endorsements in favor of authentic, user-generated stories, highlighting pivotal moments where Ridgeline gear had made a tangible difference in real outdoor adventures, resonated strongly with the executive team. It tapped into the brand's core values of reliability, trust, and the deep human connection to the natural world. Sarah Chen, the VP of marketing who had hired me, beamed as I concluded. The heads of sales and product development nodded in enthusiastic agreement. "This campaign concept connects with our core brand values perfectly, Ethan," Sarah announced, her smile genuine and appreciative. "It's authentic. It's emotionally engaging. It hits all the right notes for our target audience. Truly excellent work. We'd like you to officially lead the project implementation across all platforms." A quiet, profound sense of professional accomplishment warmed me from the inside out. Leading a major integrated campaign like this, having my strategic vision embraced so fully, had been my driving ambition since graduating college. Finally, I was here, doing the work I loved, respected for my skills, building something I believed in. As I packed up my laptop and presentation materials, feeling the satisfying weight of earned responsibility settle comfortably on my shoulders, my phone buzzed with an incoming message alert. It was from Mom. Attached was a photo, taken outdoors in bright sunshine. She was standing, radiating a happiness I hadn't seen in years, in front of a charming small brick building with large welcoming display windows and a freshly painted blue door. In her hand, held up triumphantly like a trophy, was a set of shiny new keys. The message typed below was short, sweet, and brimming with newfound joy. "Sign the lease today. Karen's Cozy Reads Cafe officially opens next month. Moving to San Antonio was the absolute best decision. Thinking of you. XO." After the divorce settlement was finalized, which, thanks to the incontrovertible evidence of financial fraud, resulted in her recovering most of her stolen savings, while Bill received probation, a hefty restitution order, and a felony conviction that made finding contracting work difficult, Mom had decided, with enthusiastic encouragement from Aunt June and Hannah, who also lived near San Antonio, not to return to the emotional drain of nursing. Instead, she was bravely, joyfully pursuing the quiet, cherished dream she'd put on indefinite hold for over 20 years. Opening her own small, independent bookstore combined with a cozy neighborhood cafe. She'd found the perfect, slightly neglected spot in a transitioning, artsy neighborhood, using her settlement funds and a small business loan, facilitated by contacts Olivia Chen had discreetly provided, to make it happen. Moving away from Dayton entirely, away from the painful memories and the potential for awkward community encounters, had been crucial for her healing, her fresh start. Close enough for planned visits, but far enough to truly, finally, build a life entirely on her own terms. I texted back instantly, my own grin mirroring hers in the photo. "That's amazing, Mom. So incredibly proud of you. Congratulations. Can't wait to visit and buy the very first coffee and book." I saved the photo, marveling at the resilience of the human spirit, at how much had fundamentally changed, improved, for both of us in just half a year. Last I'd heard, through a brief, somewhat reluctant update from Hannah, who had maintained minimal contact for legal reasons, Bill had indeed moved out of state after his sentencing, reportedly drifting through Wyoming and Montana, picking up sporadic construction or ranch hand jobs where his record wasn't immediately checked, and generally keeping his head down. His destructive chapter in our lives felt definitively, blessedly closed. That evening, needing to decompress after the intensity of the successful campaign presentation and still buoyed by the emotional resonance of Mom's joyful news, I drove out to one of my favorite thinking spots, a scenic overlook perched high in the hills just outside Austin. I hiked up the short, familiar trail to the ridge overlooking the sprawling city. The air was sharp and cool, carrying the clean scent of cedar and the subtle promise of approaching autumn rain. I found a large, flat limestone rock, still faintly warm from the departed afternoon sun, and sat down, taking in the breathtaking panoramic view of the valley spread out below me. The city lights were just beginning to twinkle to life, like scattered diamonds on dark velvet, as dusk settled gently over the landscape. I thought back over the tumultuous journey of the past year, the bitter metallic tang of the energy drink, the gnawing, creeping suspicion, the quiet, lonely battles fought in silence against self-doubt and external manipulation, the eventual, messy confrontation, the slow, arduous climb towards liberation. It had required a quiet, stubborn determination, a refusal deep within me to accept the negative narrative Bill had constantly tried to impose. A conscious effort to break free, not just from his toxic physical presence, but from the insidious grip of his doubt, from the belief ingrained by years of subtle criticism that I should somehow settle for less than I was capable of, less than I truly deserved. Victory, I reflected, gazing out at the peaceful vista, didn't always need to roar or demand attention. It hadn't involved fiery, dramatic revenge plots or satisfying courtroom showdowns where villains received their public comeuppance, at least not directly orchestrated by me. Sometimes, victory whispered. It whispered in the quiet, incremental moments of healing and rebuilding. A mother courageously reclaiming her stolen future, finally unlocking the door to her own long-deferred dream. A son finding his professional footing, earning respect through quiet competence, meticulously building a life defined by his own values and choices. A heavy, invisible weight lifted imperceptibly from both their shoulders, allowing them finally, truly, to breathe freely again. Almost unconsciously, my hand drifted to the side pocket of my backpack. Tucked inside, wrapped in a cloth napkin, was the brightly colored travel mug from that fateful morning 6 months prior. I'd kept it, washed meticulously clean but stored away out of sight, not as a morbid trophy, but as a potent, tangible reminder. A reminder of the hidden threat that can lurk behind a familiar smile. A reminder of the importance of trusting my own intuition. A reminder of the precise moment everything irrevocably changed. I pulled it out now, perhaps for the last time, turning the smooth, cheap plastic over and over in my hands in the fading twilight, feeling its odd lightness, its lingering symbolic weight. It felt like an artifact from another life entirely, belonging to a younger, more vulnerable version of myself. After a long, contemplative moment, I stood up. With a quiet sense of finality, I carefully placed the brightly colored mug on the flat limestone rock where I'd been sitting, nestling it amongst the weathered stones and the hardy, drought-resistant Texas wildflowers. A small, silent offering to the vast, indifferent landscape, a symbolic letting go of the bitterness, the fear, the past it represented. Then, I turned my back on it and started walking slowly, deliberately, back down the mountain trail towards my car, towards my apartment, towards my promising future at Ridgeline, towards my mother's new beginning in San Antonio. with each steady step downwards, away from the overlook, away from the discarded symbol of past trauma. I felt inexplicably, profoundly lighter, as if shedding an invisible burden I hadn't even fully realized I was still carrying. The future, like the twinkling city lights spread out invitingly below, felt bright, open, and wonderfully refreshingly full of possibility. The transition to independence was both exhilarating and slightly terrifying. 3 weeks into my new role at Ridgeline Media, I was starting to hit my stride, immersing myself in the fast-paced world of digital marketing campaigns, analytics reports, and creative brainstorming sessions. The energy at Ridgeline was infectious, a stark contrast to the stagnant negativity I'd left behind. My studio apartment, though small and furnished with a motley collection of hand-me-downs and budget finds, felt like a palace, a quiet sanctuary that was entirely, unequivocally mine. The simple act of making my own coffee in the morning, untainted by suspicion, felt like a small but significant victory. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt like I was breathing clean air, both literally and figuratively, building something positive. Mom and I maintained regular contact, speaking on the phone every few days. Our conversations felt different now, imbued with a newfound honesty and mutual respect, less burdened by the unspoken tensions that had defined our interactions for so long. She had, as promised, filed for divorce the Monday immediately after I left, the same day she had her initial, lengthy consultation with the divorce lawyer Hannah had recommended, the one specializing in financial abuse cases. It hadn't been easy, she admitted. Bill, predictably, hadn't taken the news of the divorce filing or the preceding police investigation well. According to Mom, his reaction had been volatile and erratic, cycling through phases of explosive rage, tearful, pathetic pleading, and desperate, transparently hollow promises to change, to get counseling, to make things right. He keeps insisting it was all just one big misunderstanding, she told me during one late-night call from Aunt June's farm, her voice weary but underscored with a firmness I admired. Claims he was just borrowing the savings money, fully intending to pay it all back when his next big contracting job came through. A job that never seemed to materialize, of course. Says the pills must have been old prescription leftovers someone else left in his toolbox years ago, that he completely forgot about them. I listened quietly, offering unwavering support but refraining from offering unsolicited advice unless she specifically asked for it. "We both know better than that, Mom," was all I needed to say. And she did. The scales had definitively fallen from her eyes, shattered by the weight of evidence and betrayal, and there was absolutely no going back for her. She was focused on untangling the legal and financial mess, and more importantly, on healing. On a crisp Thursday evening several weeks later, as autumn began to paint the Texas hills in shades of rust and gold, I was heading back to my apartment after a particularly productive day strategizing Ridgeline's upcoming holiday season campaign. My phone rang, displaying Mom's number. I answered, expecting our usual check-in call. Her voice, however, sounded different, steadier, clearer than I'd heard it in years, yet tinged with something solemn, final. "Ethan, it's Mom." A slight pause. "Honey, it's done," she said quietly. "The police just left Aunt June's house a little while ago." My grip tightened instinctively on the steering wheel. I immediately pulled over to the side of the quiet residential street I was on, my heart suddenly pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "What happened, Mom? What's done? Are you okay?" "I'm okay," she reassured me quickly, her voice remaining remarkably steady. "Shaken up, naturally, but okay. The bank's full fraud investigation came through today. They presented their findings to the district attorney. It confirmed everything we suspected, and then some." Her voice hardened slightly with remembered anger. "Forgery on 11 withdrawal slips over 18 months, Clear electronic trails of systematic draining of the savings into those hidden accounts he set up. She took a deep breath. And apparently, when the police executed that search warrant at the house a few weeks ago, based on my initial statement and the bank's preliminary findings, they didn't just find those unmarked pills. They found other paraphernalia in his locked workshop closet. Enough evidence, combined with the financial crimes and the potential assault charge from the energy drink incident, for the DA to move forward. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for weeks, letting the weight of the news sink in. It was finally happening. Real consequences. So, what does that mean? Is Bill gone? Yes, she confirmed, the single word heavy with finality. They came out to the farm with an arrest warrant about an hour ago. Took him downtown. The detective called me afterwards. Potential charges are serious. Felony fraud, multiple counts of forgery, illegal possession of prescription medication without a valid prescription, possibly even felony assault, depending on what the lab finds in those pills, and identity theft because of the email forwarding and setting up those hidden accounts using my information. She paused, taking another shaky, audible breath. I'm still at Aunt June's, obviously, safe and sound. Going to stay here for a while longer, I think, until things settle down and the legal process plays out. Aunt June, Mom's pragmatic, no-nonsense older sister who lived on a small, rambling farm outside Austin, had always been her steadfast rock in times of crisis. After hanging up, promising to call her back later that evening, I sat in my parked car for a long time, the engine idling softly. I watched the Texas sunset paint the sky in dramatic fiery streaks of gold and purple above the distant city skyline. I thought about the bitter, electric blue energy drink that fateful morning, the oily residue swirling in the toilet bowl, how chillingly close I'd come to drinking it, how easily, how disastrously, things could have gone another, much darker way. I didn't feel a surge of triumph, not exactly. Not a vindictive joy in Bill's downfall. Just a profound, quiet, bone-deep relief. A heavy, suffocating chapter had finally, irrevocably closed. The threat was neutralized. Later that evening, as I was making a simple pasta dinner in the comforting quiet of my own kitchen, a text message alert chimed on my phone. It was from Mom's number. I opened it, expecting maybe a further update or just a good night message. Instead, the screen displayed a photo. It wasn't one of her usual pictures of her cat, or the flowers blooming in Aunt June's rambling garden. It was a simple selfie of her and Aunt June sitting side by side on the weathered wooden porch swing of the old farmhouse where Mom had spent her childhood summers, a place I knew held deep, comforting memories of safety, family, and belonging for her. Both women were smiling into the camera, genuine, unforced smiles, squinting slightly against the warm glow of the setting sun behind them. The accompanying message was simple, typed below the image, just 6 powerful words. Starting over. Thank you for showing me how. I set my phone down gently on the worn countertop, a lump forming unexpectedly in my throat. I looked around my small, simple apartment, the secondhand furniture, the unpacked boxes still stacked in one corner, the single thriving pothos plant on the windowsill. It wasn't much yet, just the bare-bones basics of a life starting anew. But in that moment, looking at my mother's resilient smile, it felt like everything. More than enough. Sometimes I realized with sudden clarity, the most effective, most satisfying form of revenge, if one could even call it that, isn't about striking back, isn't about inflicting pain to balance the scales of hurt received. Sometimes, the deepest victory lies simply in walking away from the toxicity, in refusing to let it define you, in breaking the cycle, and having the quiet, unshakable courage to build something better, something healthier, something true, entirely on your own terms. 6 months later, the tumultuous events of the previous year felt like a distant, slightly surreal memory, faded like an old photograph. Life had settled into a new, positive rhythm. I stood in the bright, modern main conference room at Ridgeline Media, confidently clicking through the final slides of my comprehensive presentation outlining the integrated marketing campaign for their crucial winter gear collection launch. The concept I'd meticulously developed over weeks of research, brainstorming, and late nights, foregoing the usual predictable tropes of extreme athletes on snowy peaks, and instead centering the campaign around authentic, emotionally resonant stories sourced directly from real Ridgeline customers, had clearly struck a chord. The narratives highlighted pivotal, relatable moments where the gear hadn't just performed technically, but had made a tangible, meaningful difference in their outdoor adventures. The reliable tent that weathered an unexpected mountain storm, the warm sleeping bag that made a child's first camping trip magical, the durable backpack that carried essential supplies on a challenging multi-day trek, the fail-safe headlamp that guided a hiker safely back after dusk. The campaign focused on reliability, earned trust, and the deep intrinsic human connection to the outdoors, positioning Ridgeline not just as a gear provider, but as a trusted partner in meaningful experiences. The executives gathered around the polished table. Sarah Chen, the VP of Marketing who had taken a chance on me, the demanding but fair heads of sales and product development, even the usually reserved CFO, nodded appreciatively as I walked them through the final rollout strategy, the targeted digital assets, the planned social media engagement tactics, the metrics for measuring success. This campaign concept connects with our core brand values perfectly, Ethan, Sarah announced with genuine enthusiasm as I concluded, her smile broad and encouraging. It's authentic, it's emotionally engaging, it's strategically sound, and it hits all the right notes for our target demographic. Truly excellent work. The entire team is impressed. We'd like you to officially lead the project implementation across all digital and traditional platforms. A quiet, profound sense of professional accomplishment, unburdened by past negativity, warmed me from the inside out. Leading a major integrated campaign like this, having my strategic vision not just accepted but enthusiastically embraced, had been my driving ambition since graduating college. Finally, I was here, fully immersed in doing the challenging, creative work I loved, respected for my skills and insights, actively building something I genuinely believed in. As I began packing up my laptop and presentation materials, feeling the satisfying, tangible weight of earned responsibility settle comfortably onto my shoulders, my phone buzzed quietly on the table with an incoming message alert. Glancing down, I saw it was from Mom. My heart gave a small, happy leap. Attached to the message was a photo, clearly taken outdoors in bright, cheerful sunshine. Mom was standing, absolutely beaming, radiating a visible happiness and confidence I hadn't seen in her in decades, in front of a charming, small brick storefront. The building had large, welcoming display windows showcasing arrangements of books, and a freshly painted, inviting blue front door. In her hand, held up triumphantly towards the camera like a hard-won trophy, was a set of shiny new keys. The typed message below was short, sweet, and brimming with palpable, infectious joy. Signed the lease today. Karen's Cozy Reads Cafe officially opens next month. Moving to San Antonio was the absolute best decision. So happy, thinking of you. XO. After the divorce settlement was finalized several months prior, which, thanks to the solid evidence of financial fraud and Bill's eventual guilty plea to lesser financial crime charges to avoid a potentially harsher sentence at trial, resulting in probation, mandatory counseling, and a significant restitution order he'd likely be paying off for years. Mom had decided, with the full, enthusiastic encouragement of her sister, Aunt June, and my sister Hannah, who also lived near San Antonio, providing a crucial support network, not to return to the familiar but emotionally draining demands of nursing. Instead, she was bravely, joyfully, finally pursuing the quiet, cherished dream she'd nurtured secretly, but put on indefinite hold for over 20 years while raising me and then navigating her relationship with Bill. Opening her own small, independent bookstore combined with a cozy neighborhood cafe, a haven for readers and coffee lovers alike. She'd found the perfect, slightly neglected but full of potential spot in a transitioning, increasingly artsy San Antonio neighborhood, using her portion of the divorce settlement funds and a small business loan, which Olivia Chen's network had discreetly helped facilitate, to make her long-deferred dream a tangible reality. Moving away from Dayton entirely, leaving behind the painful memories, the judgmental whispers of former neighbors, and the potential for any awkward or unwanted community encounters, had been, she'd told me repeatedly, absolutely crucial for her healing, her sense of renewal, her fresh start. San Antonio was close enough for planned visits, but far enough away for her to truly, finally, build a life entirely on her own terms, surrounded by the unwavering support of her sister and daughter. I texted back instantly, my own wide grin mirroring hers in the sun-drenched photo. "That's amazing, Mom! Incredible news. So incredibly proud of you. Congratulations. Can't wait to come down for the grand opening and buy the very first coffee and a whole stack of books." I saved the photo to my phone's favorites, marveling again at the quiet resilience of the human spirit, at how much had fundamentally changed, fundamentally improved, for both of us in just over half a year. The last I'd heard, through a brief, somewhat reluctant update from Hannah, who maintained only the most minimal, legally necessary contact regarding logistical loose ends, Bill had indeed moved out of state after his sentencing, reportedly drifting through Wyoming and Montana, picking up sporadic, low-paying construction or seasonal ranch hand jobs where his criminal record wasn't immediately checked, and generally keeping his head very low. His destructive, manipulative chapter in both our lives felt definitively, blessedly, thankfully closed. That evening, needing to decompress after the exhilarating intensity of the successful campaign presentation, and still feeling the warm emotional resonance of Mom's joyful news, I drove out of the city towards the familiar solace of the nearby hills, seeking one of my favorite thinking spots, a scenic overlook perched high above the city lights. I hiked up the short, dusty trail as the sun dipped lower, painting the vast Texas sky in breathtaking hues of fiery orange, soft pink, and deepening purple. Reaching the ridge, I found a large, flat limestone rock, still faintly warm from the departed afternoon sun, and sat down, taking in the breathtaking panoramic view of the valley spread out below me. The city lights were just beginning to twinkle to life, like scattered diamonds on dark velvet as dusk settled gently, peacefully, over the landscape. I sat there for a long time, just breathing the clean, cool air, sharp with the scent of cedar and the dry earth, letting the silence and the vastness settle my mind. I thought back over the tumultuous journey of the past year, the bitter, metallic tang of the drugged energy drink, the gnawing, creeping suspicion morphing into terrifying certainty, the quiet, lonely internal battles fought against self-doubt and external manipulation, the final, messy confrontation, the slow, arduous climb towards liberation and self-definition. It had required a quiet, stubborn determination I hadn't known I possessed, a refusal deep within me to accept the negative, limiting narrative Bill had constantly tried to impose, a conscious, often painful effort to break free not just from his toxic physical presence, but from the insidious, corrosive grip of his doubt, from the belief ingrained by years of subtle criticism and overt dismissal that I should somehow settle for less than I was capable of, less than I truly deserved. Victory, I reflected again, gazing out at the peaceful, twinkling vista below, didn't always need to roar or demand validation. It hadn't involved fiery, satisfying revenge plots or dramatic courtroom showdowns where villains received their public, cinematic comeuppance, at least not directly orchestrated or witnessed by me. Sometimes, perhaps most times, victory whispered. It whispered not in the downfall of the antagonist, but in the quiet, incremental moments of healing, rebuilding, and self-discovery. A mother courageously reclaiming her stolen future, bravely unlocking the door to her own long-deferred dream, her smile radiating newfound freedom. A son finding his professional footing, earning respect through quiet competence and integrity, meticulously building a life defined by his own values and aspirations, not by the limitations others tried to impose. A heavy, invisible weight lifted imperceptibly, but definitively from both their shoulders, allowing them finally, truly, to breathe freely again, to stand taller. Almost unconsciously, as if drawn by a final need for closure, my hand drifted to the side pocket of my backpack. Tucked inside, still wrapped in the cloth napkin I'd put it in months ago, was the brightly colored travel mug from that fateful morning. I'd kept it, washed meticulously clean immediately after discarding its contents, but stored away out of sight in the back of a closet. It wasn't a morbid trophy, not a symbol of triumph over Bill. It was something more complex, a tangible reminder. A reminder of the hidden threat that can lurk behind a familiar, smiling facade. A reminder of the critical importance of trusting my own intuition, even when it felt paranoid. A reminder of the precise, chilling moment when everything irrevocably changed, when naive trust shattered, and a harder, more wary self began to emerge. I pulled it out now, perhaps for the very last time, turning the smooth, cheap plastic over and over in my hands in the fading twilight of the Texas hills. It felt strangely light now, almost insignificant, stripped of its earlier, sinister power. It was just an object, an artifact from another life, a life that no longer belonged to me, representing a version of myself, younger, more vulnerable, more easily manipulated, that I no longer was. After a long, contemplative moment, feeling a sense of finality settle over me, I stood up. With quiet deliberation, I carefully placed the brightly colored travel mug on the flat limestone rock where I'd been sitting, nestling it amongst the weathered stones and the hardy, drought-resistant Texas wildflowers that clung to the rocky soil. A small, silent offering to the vast, indifferent landscape spreading out below. A symbolic letting go, not just of the mug, but of the bitterness, the fear, the lingering residue of the past it represented. Then, taking a deep, cleansing breath of the cool evening air, I turned my back on it and started walking slowly, deliberately, back down the familiar mountain trail towards my car, towards my apartment, towards my promising future at Ridgeline Media, towards my mother's hopeful new beginning in San Antonio. With each steady downward step, away from the overlook, away from the discarded, brightly colored symbol of past trauma and manipulation, I felt inexplicably, profoundly lighter, as if shedding an invisible, heavy burden I hadn't even fully realized I was still carrying until the moment I released it. The future, like the vast expanse of twinkling city lights spread out invitingly below, felt bright, open, and wonderfully, refreshingly full of hard-won possibility.